Hello, everybody. Hello. Thank you. Welcome to the panel discussion. It's so great to see everybody here on such a lovely day. We're going to talk about the real cost of local food, but I have a few things to say first. And because I'm on stage, I get to say, please turn off your cell phones.
Good idea.
Yeah. You too, panelists. First, I want to thank some of our sponsors, without whom we could not be doing Restaurant Week. Vermont Federal Credit Union. Right. Yep. Vermont Butter and Cheese Creamery. You can hold your applause till the end, okay? This might take a while. Vermont White Vodka by Vermont Spirits. Please sample some tonight. Shipyard Brewing Company. Delicato Family Vineyards, WCAX TV, The Point. Is this popping? Yes, okay. Also want to thank Signal Kitchen for hosting us here tonight. This is a really awesome room. Thank you so much. And Bevo for the beverage service out in the front. Thank you very much. Now you can applause. Applaud. I also would like to introduce a very important person. Restaurant Week, as you probably know, is benefiting the Vermont Food Bank as much as we possibly can, thanks to all of you who have donated or who will donate tonight. And I'd like to introduce John Sales, CEO of Vermont Food Bank.
Thank you, Pamela. And thank you, everyone, for being here. And I also want to thank the sponsors, because without them, Restaurant Week would not be here and benefiting all of our friends and neighbors who need some extra help. So let's give another hand to our sponsors. And of course, 7 Days, who came to us years ago and said, let's partner on this. And it's just grown. Restaurant Week has grown as an event. It gets more exciting every year, and we're so proud to be part of it and to be able to talk about our neighbors, the 1 in 7 neighbors who don't have enough food to eat every day. But tonight we're talking about the real cost of local food. So what does that have to do with the Vermont Food Bank? I can make that connection. First of all, the Vermont Food Bank, for those of you who don't know, we're sort of the Black River produce of the charitable food world. So we help provide food to 270 partners all across the state. And those are food shelves and meal sites like soup kitchens, homeless shelters, after-school programs, and senior centers. Last year, we distributed over 8 million pounds of food. That's probably less than you, but it's a lot of food. So it's we're a good-sized food distribution company for Vermont. We also have a number of programs, children's programs, the backpack program. We have a school pantry to go program. We do a summer feeding program with kids. So we try and get involved anywhere we can that's going to help bring more food to more people. And those people, I love this statistic. It's at least 86,000 Vermonters, and that is St. Albans, Burlington, Rutland, St. Johnsbury, and Brattleboro combined, the population. So just think about the combined populations of all those cities not knowing where their next meal is going to come from. And that's what happens in Vermont. Something to think about. So we think a lot about local food. I've been with the food bank for 4 years, and I've worked for the state for many years before that. And one thing that I always say is a local food system is not sustainable unless it's a local food system for everyone. And I've made sure, with help from a lot of people, that the Vermont Food Bank's at the table in this conversation, because I truly believe if we're going to make this work in Vermont and be a model for the rest of the country, then it really has to work for everyone. And my entire panel up here, I'd never met Michael before, and I know that his restaurants are probably very efficient and don't have much waste, so they're probably not donors to the Vermont Food Bank. But 7 Days is a great partner of the food bank, and everyone else here is a donor to the Vermont Food Bank. In fact, just about anyone who makes, processes, or distributes food in Vermont is a donor to the Vermont Food Bank. And Jericho Settlers Farm, along with probably 150 other farms, donate to the Vermont Food Bank. So I'm just... Oh, the other thing I wanted to... I put my glasses on top of my head, and then I can't read what I wanted to say. We also are involved in the local food movement in that the Vermont Food Bank owns a farm. We have the Kingsbury Farm in Warren, Vermont, which we lease to a couple farmers who do a tremendous job, and they pay us the lease every year in fresh vegetables that they grow on the farm, which are then distributed in the Mad River Valley area and throughout the state. So we put our money where our mouth is. We really believe in the real cost, our local food for everybody. The biggest barriers, which I think they're going to talk about tonight, the biggest barriers, of course, are cost and access, and our food system, which is broken and needs to be fixed. And I think we're really a model for the beginning of fixing that. But instead of thinking about the real cost of local food, I like to think about the real value of local food, because local food, not only is it more nutritious, better tasting, but it really nurtures our community. And that's what is so special about Vermont, and that's why it's happening first here, because we had so much community to begin with. And now this is just really bringing it together on another level. So I will stop talking and let you hear from the panel. Thank you all very much.
He's giving away a cookbook.
Giving away a cookbook. The Vermont Farm Table Cookbook by Tracy Medeiros. And Tracy called me. Tracy called me probably 8 months ago and said, I write these cookbooks and I always try and find a good cause to donate part of the profits of the book to. And she chose the Vermont Food Bank. So we're right here in one of the front pages where she says that a portion of the profits from the sale of this book will come to the Vermont Food Bank. And so we're very happy to to raffle off an advanced copy. The book has not been released yet.
Oh, it's upside down. 107303.
Oh, we have a winner!
A lot of people shouted. Who is it? Oh. Okay.
Congratulations.
I'm a local board cook.
Excellent.
Congratulations. Thank you, John. All right, so I'd like you to get to know our panelists here. So I'm just going to tell you a few brief things about each one of them. But first I want to say that Sue Betty, the founding partner of Bluebird Restaurant Group, was going to be here and had a death in the family, so she sent her chef, Michael Klaus. Thank you.
No problem.
He told me Santa Claus, but I can't keep that in my head. He has kindly agreed to be here. So I'll introduce him first, Michael. Michael is a former instructor at the New England Culinary Institute. He further sharpened his own chops in New York, where he was the executive chef of Daniel Boulud Catering Company, Feast and Fets, I love that name, and as sous chef at the restaurant Daniel. Michael returned to Vermont in 2010 to work as the chef of Burlington's Daily Planet, and while he was there, he competed to represent the entire United States in the world's most prestigious culinary competition, the Bocuse d'Or. That didn't result in a win. Sorry, Michael.
It's okay.
But Burlington diners are winners because he's here cooking for us. Michael moved over to the Bluebird Tavern in late 2010 and since has been turning out dishes that I have to say are just as beautiful as they are delicious.
Thank you.
The Bluebird restaurant group includes the Tavern, the barbecue, and the coffee shop kiosk downtown, and the coffee stop, rather, brand new one in the Innovation Center in the South End. From the beginning, Bluebird has emphasized the use of high-quality local and regional ingredients and is committed to local community organizations. Say hello to Michael.
Hello.
Christa Alexander, to his left. Christa operates Jericho Settlers Farm with her husband, Mark Fashing, in, not surprisingly, Jericho. They produce certified organic vegetables and raise grass-fed beef, pork, and lamb, and they sell all of this along with chicken and eggs through a year-round CSA, the Burlington Farmers Market, local stores, and restaurants. Christa and Mark are also raising 2 children, Asa and Hazel, who are neither grass-fed nor for sale. Is that right? Yeah. Time will tell. Christa and Mark are both former biologists who began farming in 2002 and quit their other jobs to become full-time farmers in 2006 on, I understand, land that Christa grew up on. Is that right? They're leasing 150 acres of crop and grazing land in Jericho and Richmond. During the winters, Christa is apparently incapable of taking a much-needed break and instead teaches Nordic skiing. That's a break, yeah. Christa, I don't know how you find the time to come here tonight, but thank you for doing it. Applause for Christa. Thank you. Sean Buchanan, to my left. Sean is the business development manager for Black River Produce, which delivers wholesale food from local farms and other markets around Vermont, as well as in New Hampshire, parts of Massachusetts, and New York. One of Sean's roles is to help chefs integrate sustainable ingredients into their menus. He also writes a food column for the Stowe Reporter. And to give you a sense of Sean's personality, I'd just like to read this brief excerpt from his top 10 foodie list of 2012. Dear Acorn Squash, you've never been my #1, but you've grown with me in the last year. I've always thought you were just a friend, and it was nice to see you in a dish every once in a while. I don't know if it's going to the gym or the new dishes you've inspired, but now I can't get enough of you. I just want to eat you up all the time. I've even started to dream about you. Call me sometime. There's more. I want to melt butter all over you. Sean also wrote and filmed for Vermont Public Television a 6-episode series called Feast in the Making. Sean has been a professional chef, too, including a couple of years, 2008 to 2010, at Solstice at the Stowe Mountain Resort, or Lodge, where he demonstrated that farm-to-hotel cuisine can be profitable. And not to be outdone by the other multitaskers on this panel, Sean works with state and nonprofit groups to develop innovation in small-scale agriculture. Let's hear it for Sean. Last but not least, Allison might be considered Vermont's cheese queen, and I mean that in the best possible way. She launched her career actually as a college student while working as a cheese-making apprentice in France. She was a dairy products quality technician for the Vermont Ag Department. And, sorry, I lost my place. In 1984, I can't believe it's that long ago, she co-founded Vermont Butter and Cheese with Bob Reese. The company has gone on to win more than 100 national and international awards for its products. Allison is also the founding president of the Vermont Cheese Council and former president of the American Cheese Society. She's served on numerous boards, including the Vermont Sustainable Job Fund and the Vermont Fresh Network, which, as I'm sure you know, is an organization that promotes local sustainable food distribution through farmer-to-chef partnerships. Allison's know-how was employed overseas once again in Macedonia in the late 90s when she worked with Land O'Lakes International Development to revitalize cheesemaking. Back in Vermont, Allison and her husband Don have 3 sons. They live in Brookfield. Congratulations, Allison. Welcome. Thank you. So the structure of this tonight, now that you've met everybody, is I'm going to ask these people some questions, and you're going to have questions probably yourself. I'd like you to hold those until the end. We'll go for about a half hour or so, and then you can interrogate all you like. So the Salon, again, is titled The Real Cost of Local Food. And that word cost is the provocative topic. But before we get into that, I'd like to ask the panelists a more basic and maybe equally provocative question. What is local? As Catherine Flagg reported in 7 Days this week, Vermont beef producers do not agree on what defines a local cow. Some say that, like people, an animal must be born and raised here to be considered a Vermonter. Other producers say they have to bring in some Flatlander cows, they don't really call them that, in order to meet the increasing demand for their product. Jim Kleps of La Platte River Angus suggests that if a cow is grown from 700 pounds to its full size of 1,200 pounds in state, it's a Vermont animal. And in the Burlington and Montpelier farmers markets, both have established a standard that animals being sold as local have to have spent the last 75% of their lives in Vermont. There are a lot of definitions of local. Panelists, I'd like to start with your thoughts about this. Let's start with Christa, who is raising cows herself.
Sure. Well, for us, local for us means to start to finish. So we have our own breeding herd, and calves are born on the farm, and they finish on the farm, and we sell them. So we're start to finish in terms of animal production. I think the reality is, though, that especially farms that are starting out, like investing in a breeding herd is quite expensive. And so if you're trying to figure out how to produce beef profitably and whether your land base can sustain it and how to manage your land base, you're probably not going to invest in a breeding herd the first year. You're going to buy those 700 or 800 pound animals that are almost a year old. And the way grass-fed beef production works is you typically are finishing those animals when they're 1.5 to 2 years old. And so they're going to be with you probably, if you're buying them as yearlings, they're going to be a little bit, it's not going to be 75% of their lifetime in terms of that definition of local. So, I think I think there's a lot of different ways to look at it, honestly, and I don't think any one of them is right or wrong, and it's really what works for the farm and the land. I mean, farming is so land specific as to what natural resources you have available on your farm. Some things you're going to be able to do and make a living at it, and some things you're not. And I think, there's a whole realm of market niches to fill, and so some people are going to be looking for that very local product where the animal is born and raised and finished on that one farm. And other people are going to be fine with the animal that comes in, say, from New York at a year old, gets finished by a viable Vermont farm that can make a living doing that type of finishing. And when I say finishing, that's the process of, taking the animal from a yearling stage to a finished, fattened, well-filled out, high-quality meat animal. That's what finishing means. So, I'm not one that sees it as black and white, and I don't feel that producers should be judged one way or the other. I think they should just be honest about what they're doing, and the consumer should be honest about what they're looking for, and you just find the right match for what you need.
So you don't think there should be a standard for what we can all agree on?
How could you make a standard for local?
I don't know.
Yeah, I just don't know. I mean, because you take another product, I'm trying to think of something that's not readily available in the Northeast. Yeah, or peaches. Even peaches. We don't have enough peaches to feed all the people of Vermont that want peaches, obviously, that are grown in Vermont. And so it's okay, we buy a lot of peaches from Pennsylvania. Is that local enough versus buying peaches from Spain? I mean, so there's all these nuances. Or maybe you just say, well, I'm not going to buy peaches because I really want only, Vermont fruit, or I only want fruit that's grown 5 miles from my house. I mean, that's okay. That's a decision you can make. And the reality is the market is huge, and there's all different types of products and all different types of niches, and the producer and the consumer just have to have an honest conversation. And I recognize that can't always happen face to face, and so that's, I think, where it gets difficult for people trying to get the information that they need.
Other panelists want to weigh in on this? Michael?
Yeah, I can talk about from the chef's perspective, it gets a little more complicated because you write the menu and you have to serve what you're writing on the menu, and we try to source from as local as possible, from visiting the farms and see what they have to offer. But it is more of a demand issue for the restaurant, and trying to source the products. Can we get enough of them? Then the pricing is an issue. So it's a very complicated process, and trying to level it all out to make sure the customer is happy, you're meeting your costs and your goals. So, we could talk about that for hours, hours and hours and hours. But as far as defining local, it's kind of the tricky part is if, like Christa said, with the peach, if you really want to serve peach pie at your restaurant, if you can't get a local peach, that means you can't serve, the peach pie. But can you source a well-sourced peach from Pennsylvania and still, feel confident about serving that, and that the people that are coming in aren't going to be upset that, you're serving peaches from Pennsylvania and Vermont when there's so many other things available. That's a little bit of the tough part, but there's ways around it as well, using other things. But if you really want the peach, it makes it a little tough.
Okay, Allison?
Sure. Well, I would agree with Christa that it's really about transparency and telling your customers what you're doing. I would consider our company to be a local company and a local product. We don't buy all of our milk in Vermont. Half of our business is cow's milk. It comes from St. Albans Co-op. It's hormone-free, and they have members from Maine. And they don't separate that Maine milk from Vermont milk. We buy milk from goat farms in Vermont, and we buy milk we buy milk from a co-op in Ontario. And we buy as much milk as we can here, and we tell our customers that it's not all coming from Vermont, and we state that on the back of our package. So, and I think in the case of milk, Vermonters have an expectation that when you make a dairy product, it would come from Vermont because Vermont is a dairy place. It's not really a peach place, or we don't grow coffee here, although maybe some people think we do. It's amazing what consumers think is grown, locally. You'd be surprised. And I think Vermont consumers are pretty savvy about what's grown. I think that when for us, all the milk comes to Vermont. It's transformed into cheese here. We make all of our products in one place, and we feel pretty good about that. And I think it would be kind of disingenuous to say, "Oh, well, we're not really a Vermont product." I think that we have certainly tried to, or in the process of trying to, source more and more milk in Vermont, and are investing a lot in that, because wouldn't it be great to say in 10 years that, all the milk does come from Vermont? So I guess I'll stop there.
Okay. Did you want to add something, Sean?
Yeah, sure. So Black River, we've been in business for about 35 years, and we have a pretty good definition of local as being that we pick it up in our daily distribution radius. So every day, 35 trucks go out, and they go to all the restaurants, and they drop products off, and they go to institutions and schools. And then we actually take laps around and pick up whether it's corn or lettuce or hydroponic lettuce or organic tomatoes from wherever we're driving. And then we bring it back, and then we distribute those products. And some of those products are, made with no Vermont product. I mean, these are a lot of value-added products that you see with a, Vermont brand, and a lot of people will call them out. But we feel the local definition, as far as we define it, is these are products that come from here. They're made here, and we're pretty transparent about it. Our overall feeling is that the local definition comes from the end buyer and consumer. So whatever our restaurant or chef deems as local is local. And you as consumers, if you said, what's local? Everybody would have a very specific definition for themselves. And I think it's the wrong question that we ask, which is what is local to everybody, whereas that is something that you define as an individual. And we were talking about it earlier. You know, what's good art? What's good music? What's good clothing? You know, those are decisions that you make on your own in your own core set of values. When people force a definition on you, it's not the right way to do it. I mean, you're all smart human beings. You should be able to make up your own questions and ask independent producers and pick up the phone and check their websites and do research on your own to really get the answers that you want. And there should be enough producer transparency on that end to answer those products, or as a consumer, you shouldn't buy those products.
Okay. I just have to point out that I have a peach tree in my backyard. Not telling you where I live.
I'll take 200 pounds next week.
They're not ready yet, Michael.
Okay.
So we'll devote the rest of this to that core question of cost and a lot of the factors that go into that. Why local costs what it does, whether it could or should cost less, the realities for the farmers and producers, the restaurateurs, the market owners. And Michael, why don't we start with you? What are some of the biggest challenges for sourcing local food?
For sourcing, obviously the protein items are the most challenging when we try to use, I guess, like the core local items where animals that are raised here from, you know, the birth to the slaughter, having enough, just because the eating local and buying local has become so, especially in Vermont, such a huge thing for the consumers and, you know, the restaurateurs, that it becomes an availability issue on a lot of cuts of meat and being able to get chickens and pork and cuts of pork if we want to make our own bacon, and we need, you know, 10 bellies a week because we're a busy restaurant. We have a few restaurants that may not be possible every week or every month for that matter, or, you know, if the farmer only slaughters their pigs twice a year, we may not have the facility to buy all the bellies and freeze it because we don't have that much space. So it becomes quite an issue. So then, you know, the next line is to source it from the next best place in our minds, as Sean said, like what we deem, you know, the highest quality product that, you know, we could get outside of the local core area. So that becomes a big challenge. And then the vegetables in seed, obviously in the summer it's, there's a large quantity and variety, and everyone has a lot of the same things, so it's never really an issue. But in the winter, serving a lot of pickled items and jarred items and cured items is very popular, but, a lot of people just want a tomato on their salad as well. It's just a nice tomato. So that becomes a big challenge as well, because you want to meet everyone's needs, because we're operating a business, and if, there is the core people who will only eat the local food, but a majority of the people that you depend on to keep your business afloat so you could provide those other people what they want, you have to be able to put that tomato on the salad to get those people in to pay the bills. So it's a vicious circle.
Those tomato people.
Yes.
Does anyone else want to address this question? The difficulty of sourcing local food.
Well, I can address I'm on the other end of it. I understand the difficulties in sourcing, knowing what the production limitations are in Vermont. And going back to grass-fed beef, it's a prime example. So it's a seasonal production system, and you're finishing animals on prime pasture at the end of the grazing season, and so you need to do most of your processing at that time. You can overwinter animals on high-quality hay and so forth, but the meat is at its prime and at its best when they have gone through their usually their second season of prime pasture and eating that high-quality grass through an intensive management grazing system, and so restaurants the demand is typically for fresh cuts. I mean, that's what they're used to working with, and that's the meat's arguably in most cases a higher quality when it's a fresh product than when it's been frozen. And so, we're dealing with, from a production cost standpoint, a seasonal need to process and store frozen product, which isn't going to meet needs for a lot of restaurant needs anyway. And then in general in meat production, the margins are very small, and to wholesale, you need a high volume of animals to be able to make some profit, to cover your costs and pay for your time, basically. Grass-fed production is very labor-intensive compared to feedlot grain production. You do have to move the animals every day. You have to make all the hay, or someone has to make the hay if you're buying it. It's much different than a truck coming in, dumping the grain, and the animals, maybe 3 or 4 people overseeing thousands of animals at a feedlot production type thing. And also, grass isn't subsidized, at least not in the state of Vermont, whereas corn is. So when you're looking at a corn-based animal, there are federal subsidy programs that help support that, as well as corn syrup and all the other things that happen with corn. But we have huge land costs, especially in Chittenden County. I mean, for me to go and buy a 500-acre farm, well, 1, it doesn't exist. It's not available. And 2, I couldn't afford the mortgage. And to be able to have enough animals to have the volume, because it takes me just as much time to move 100 head as it does to move 40. I just have to open a gate, and the paddock sizes are different, but those 100 animals move just maybe a few seconds longer to walk through than 40 animals. So you can see, if you're managing a bigger group, you just have more efficiency of scale going on there. But the land costs are huge, and they're not available, at least in this area. So the folks who are able to, I think some of the more profitable and successful beef farms in this area are folks who have access to a fair amount of land without the development pressure on that land, so the land values aren't as high. They're able to make a lot of their own hay because they have the land for that, as well as do the grazing, and so they're able to move a lot of head through their production system and realize some profit on that. And so once you get up to that scale and that volume, then you can start producing enough animals to do regular shipments to the slaughterhouses, and that's a whole nother deal of getting your scheduled shipments into slaughterhouses. And when you become a larger producer, you get preference at the slaughterhouses because you're there every week with 10 animals or whatever it is. You're one of their best customers, and they're making sure you get your slaughter dates whenever you need them. Right now, I have to book a year to a year and a half in advance to get the slaughter dates that I need at a slaughterhouse. And I'm still probably, certainly not their biggest customers, but I'm probably one of their medium to almost bigger size customer. And then talk about people who are just raising like 5 head and want to process them all in August. It's impossible. They can't get slaughter dates. So that's part of what we're dealing with, is sort of some infrastructure bottleneck. And then maybe Sean, I know you could talk on this a little bit more in terms of the processing end of things, but when you have a product like that with a very low margin, you want to get as much out of that as you can and do a lot of, so for us, we've stopped wholesaling a lot of our meat and are pretty much we've downsized our production to do primarily just retail, but we're looking for value-added processing so that we can get as most out of those animals as possible. Things like, hot dogs and sausages and dry-cured products, but there's not a lot of facilities available to do that in Vermont either. Until these guys are ramping up.
If I could say one thing,
sure.
if you don't mind.
Yeah.
Well, because we were just talking about it earlier, because at the barbecue, we've been planning this local, large format smoked beef dinner that I've been wanting to do, and we've been talking and to the planning that's involved, just because the process is that, and I want their beef for it, and because we love their beef, but it's not just a phone call saying I need a half a cow, next week to do this dinner. It's, I talked to Mark a couple months ago, and then to Christa again tonight. That's something that we need to plan because they're not going to slaughter till July. So, that's the kind of, the things that you run into. Not that there's anything wrong with that, because we like that because it is it's a special event. But as far as and they're kind of almost kind of doing us a favor because I'm buying half a cow that they could probably make a lot more money out of that half a cow if they cut it up and sold it all at the farmer's market than giving it to me. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of me putting pressure on them, asking them for that, and then, so it's difficult.
Yeah. Anyone else want to speak to that?
Well, I guess on the as a value-added producer, manufacturer, we have found that certainly our cost of goods, our cost of milk and goat's milk and cow's milk and cream is high here in Vermont, and we pay a lot more for goat's milk than our competition in other parts of the country. And so on one side we have our role is to make a product that will command a higher price. And to the extent that we can really deliver that very tangible benefit in terms of taste or consistency, predictability, or for the customer, has allowed us over the course of almost 30 years to be able to command a higher price and pay more for the milk. On the milk side, here we have an industry that, unlike the cow dairy industry, has no infrastructure, no formal education, no research about the management of these critters. And so we've really had to start from scratch, going around to backyard 4-H herds 9 years ago with a pickup truck and 10-gallon cans, picking up milk and paying ridiculously low prices for milk because we just didn't know any better. But it was still a lot more than cow's milk. And, the producers are, they look at the price of goat's milk and they say, oh, great, more than twice the price of cow's milk. And we say, well, wait a minute, strap yourself in, because this animal is only going to give you 2,500 pounds in a lactation, and a big old Holstein, give you 25,000. So, be careful what you ask for. And so there's a whole, education that we have to still have in our industry to deal with the question of scale. It does, scale is real, and scale is not necessarily a bad thing. It's farmers need to operate at scale. They need to be efficient. And in our experience, the farmers that are operating at scale are making a very, very high quality product, and the animals are very healthy and well cared for. So I'm babbling, sorry.
I wanted to spiral that cost question down to the consumer, or Sean, in your case, the markets that you sell to. I wonder if you could address what items people consider overpriced or unaffordable. And don't say cheese, Allison said.
Especially Vermont butter and cheese is always the right price. But it always is the right price. What is the right price? I think it's definitely consumer driven, and we work more with the wholesale side of it. On the meat side of it, I'll just be really quick. It's really simple math. You pay for processing based on a boned-in animal. So when it's hanging in the cooler, you pay to process that animal. So if you pay, some slaughterhouses around here about 78 cents a pound, it's about 4 times the national average to process up here. Then when you take that bone out, okay, so say it's a 50-50 yield, you're at $1.50, plus you got transportation costs to and fro. So before you even talk about local meat, just to process and kill it, you're probably at $2.25 to $2 a pound. So, and you might say, well, that's ridiculous. But the fact that you guys have access to those products is great, because every year we lose more and more slaughter processors because they just can't invest in the infrastructure. So I know sometimes it's a hard one to pay, but the whole idea is that you create that job. You create a job for a slaughterhouse processor so that we have a producer who can take their animal to slaughter and process. All over the country, these small processing plants are disappearing and being replaced by these jumbo processing plants. So it's hard to swallow that pill on cost sometimes, but that infrastructure is a lost art. On the consumer side, we get a lot of feedback about cost all the time. And we don't tell a farmer we're going to pay this. We don't tell a producer we're going to pay this. We can tell them what we're paying for it. You know, when somebody calls us and says, I've got squash and zucchini, and we say we talk to you every year and we tell you to stop growing squash and zucchini and grow asparagus and off-season strawberries. But I got squash and zucchini and I got 25. And we can say, this is what we paid last year for this at this time. They're flowing in like crazy. There's very little market demand. This is what we can pay because that's what everybody's paying for them. So on the produce side of it, in the large-scale world, you contract out that price before you even grow it. We're much more reactive and market-driven. So when we pick up product, we may pick up corn as local corn from 6 different producers in a day. You know, and as we start selling and running out, we call more producers and more producers call us, and then it all dries up for 3 days, and then nobody picks because it rains. But it's very much market driven. The other side of it is that we have a lot of producers who come to us and say, this is what I need to make. And that's great. I love sitting down with you and talking about what you need to make, because the first conversation we can have is, can we sell this product? Can we pick this up and reduce your cost? Then can we handle the billing so you don't have to wait for a restaurant, you know, for 45 days not to pay you because they just didn't want to pay you because it's a slow season. We can have a legitimate conversation about costs and where Black River comes in and absorbs those costs. And what we find is most of the producers who've been working with us for a long period of time like to scale up because they can scale up and get more efficient and grow more, knowing that there's more demand and that it's established demand. What we're having right now is a lot of new producers who are coming into the marketplace who are, you know, I've got 2 acres in my backyard and I'm growing some stuff, and I found a couple restaurant chefs and they're buying that product. And now I'm just at a size where I just don't want to deal with it and I want Black River to buy it. And we go, well, I told you not to grow squash and zucchini, you know, and if I buy your squash and zucchini, who am I not buying squash and zucchini from? Who's the person for 35 years that I've been buying squash and zucchini from? And why do they get a lower price? Because that's what the market demands. And that's a really tough one, is that we have relationships with producers for a long time that are really core relationships. And our biggest question is, like, if you're a new producer coming into the marketplace, who's that new consumer you're bringing with? You know, if you go to the farmer's market and Jericho Settlers is there, and then the next year there's 3 other beef producers there, and it's the same amount of people coming to the farmer's market, then everybody's selling a third beef. I'm selling a third of my beef. So where's that new marketplace? So I think it's really important, as we talk about the cost of local foods and local foods in general, is that we really have to consciously as a group say, who is the consumer right now who is not purchasing local foods, who we can bring to the marketplace and therefore create efficiency and more market demand to help sell these products at a variety of price points.
Can I just add one thing
Sure.
to this? In addition to the definition of local, that's a really key point for Vermont foods, because we don't have a lot of population here. A lot of our markets are outside of Vermont, and we're not going to be local in some of these markets, and we're going to be competing with their local products. And you know, certainly in the cheese world, we sell cheese coast to coast, and you know, we've been asked a lot, you know, so how do you sell cheese in San Francisco when you got all these great producers in Marin County? And you know, consumers want variety, and I think that consumers are buying not necessarily local geographically, but local kind of as in terms of a corporate values and you know, what sort of identifying their suppliers or their favorite cheesemakers in terms of, you know, what they do, what they make, and how they are in business. So that's important.
Michael, I'm interested in the feedback from your consumers, the restaurant diners. What kind of feedback do you get about price?
That it's expensive, you know,
Okay.
for the portion size. But, you know, we're from the wholesale perspective, we're the last stop, you know. So whether it's, you know, that's why you try to deal as direct as possible as much, because if it's already been through 2 steps and then you're the 3rd step and then I have to turn it over, and, you know, so we try to deal directly with the farmer when we're going local, and then for us, so I'll call Christa and ask her if she has, baby carrots, and if she doesn't have them, then I'll call another farmer, and then, then I would call Black River for them. Sorry, but
always the last choice.
Happens a lot, but we're open
Yes.
until 9:30. So
that is correct. That is correct. There's other places that are open later. That's the challenge. And we talked about this before we came on the panel, as far as the center of the plate items. To us, the center of the plate item when you're costing something is usually the protein. So if we get that cut of beef for $9.95 a pound, everything kind of, when we're costing it mainly revolves around that. But when you're dealing with buying the local products, it's all, it's great quality. We don't mind paying for the great quality, but in the old days, it was the center of the plate item, and then everything else was kind of pennies around that center of the plate item. So you could kind of, in the chef talk, kind of quick cost something based on the center of the plate item, add a few cents here and there in your head, and then you can come up with the cost. Where now, because a lot of the other items are expensive, it's, you have to factor those things more into the price, and that drives the price. And then when it becomes, then it becomes, you need to have more skilled people working with these items because you want to waste less. So you want to hire someone who knows how to cut beef the best, because you want to get the best yield out of the beef, because like Sean was saying, when it's hanging in the slaughterhouse, it's a 50%, loss. And then when it comes to the restaurant, there's more loss. And then if someone's cutting it and portioning it improperly, then there's even more loss. So, not to mention when people start burning stuff and dropping things on the floor, I say, like, if you drop one thing or burn one thing, I gotta sell 3 more just to make up for that, So those are some of the challenges from my end. Yes, we do get a little heat from from the guests that the prices are sometimes a little high, but in my mind, I think they're actually low, because and that's what the accountant says with the food costs too, that they should be higher. But we try to you have to offer the high quality products, the local products, at the best possible price. And we could get into a whole other realm of conversation where the places that are holding true to buying local and the true version of local that are charging those prices, and then there's maybe other places that are saying their food is local, maybe charging it a little cheaper, but maybe not buying the same, their same definition as local. Mm-hmm. So then the consumer is saying, well, I can get that local New York strip steak at, restaurant A for $19.95. Why are you charging $36.95? So that's where the challenge is a little bit, and I think that's why a lot of places put the farm name on the menu, I think, too, mm-hmm. to justify that as well. It's a challenge.
I can say, as a consumer as well, when I go to the restaurants and it says local something, I always ask them, which farm is this from? Because there is a lot of that local on the menu without any farms tied to it, and even if it says rotating through different farms, that's fine. I just want to know what they all are, and I think the restaurants that have really done a great job connecting with local farms and, like I say, putting the names on the menu, it's to their benefit. I mean, obviously it helps the farms too, but it's really telling a story, and it's showing a commitment, and it's showing a relationship that is in name. It's not just maybe there's a relationship out there, and I think most consumers, maybe not ones who don't know the farms, who are from further away, and maybe, I guess, depends how many tourists you get versus locals, but local consumers too. So.
But if I gotta add one more item to that, if I put Jericho Settlers New York Strip on my menu, and I don't say, I'm not a restaurant that prints my menu every day, and then I run out of her strip steak and I have to use someone else's, then it's like then it's a morality issue, you know. And then do I need to reprint the menu? Then there's the menu printing issue. So like, it's kind of where it gets skewed, because then you know, people could fall under it. Well, it's Thursday. We'll be getting the Jericho stuff on Monday, so let's just roll with this other stuff, and we'll just keep the Jericho on the menu. So you know, those kinds of things happen.
And is your printer local?
You know,
you can get very carried away with local.
And what I was going to say to that, I'm sorry, I told you I was an interrupter. It's not fair to the farmer that someone thinks they're getting their meat and maybe they're not, and because if they have a bad experience with it, then it's hurting the farmer's business because someone was lying to them just to make more money. So that's, I think, from the restaurateurs world, that's what's really making this kind of like a jumbled issue at times.
So Vermont is small, and it seems like we don't have enough. We don't have enough slaughterhouses. We have a short growing season. There's a lot of kind of scarcity talk here. But on the other hand, there's increasing demand, or it seems that way to me. So how do you get your products to, how do you convince more chefs, more restaurateurs, more markets to carry Vermont products? How do you go about that? 3 of you are doing that.
You grow in the winter.
You grow in the winter. Can you address that?
Sure. Well, you talked about it a little bit. You know, in the winter, it's like you're pickling everything. But there certainly is a developing area, at least in vegetable production, in off-season growing, we call it, or the margins, or season extension. And, you know, whether or not you believe in global warming, if that happens, it's going to even get better and easier. But right now, I mean, we do grow year-round, and you know, and we do it in unheated hoop houses. I mean, obviously we can't grow tomatoes in an unheated house in January, but we can grow a lot of cold hardy greens and similar things. And so I think more and more producers are recognizing that there are markets available in the off season. It is more challenging, there's more risk, and so you do have to charge more for your product. And so that might be hard on the buyer's end to like shift menus seasonally and shift prices seasonally, because the local production challenges also shift seasonally. But, you know, for example, we have to charge $2 more per pound for greens produced in the winter than ones grown between June and September, say. But I think it's interesting. I mean, the whole scarcity question, I think there's definitely some scarcity there. But I know, like, say, in the CSA realm, where a lot of farmers are selling direct to their consumers, that market has become more and more saturated over the last 5 years, at least in this part of the state. So it gets back to Sean's question, is like, how do we convert more consumers or bring more consumers to the local table? And I think that's, and food access. How do we get the food to, you know, folks who don't normally have the avenues to access local food? So I think that's, you know, I don't know. I think that's part of the challenge, and I feel like there are seasonal scarcities, but I feel like it's possible. Like, there are so many growers interested in becoming farmers, and that's part of, like, on our farm, you know, we hire local folks and pay them well and train them to become farmers, and they leave and become farmers. And so one of our costs is retraining people every year, but it's part of what we want to do. And, you know, we don't have, you know, a crew of professional seasonal workers available out there. You know, it's like, you know, other industries have that, or they have, you know, folks that move seasonally in their regions, and you know, we don't utilize that on our farm, and so that's another cost of production as part of, like, training more people to help with this scarcity issue.
Mm-hmm. Do you want to address that?
With the labor part or the seasonality?
With developing new markets, actually.
Yeah, I mean,
it's kind of chicken and egg, trying to get more people to.
It is. I mean, we have 7 outside sales reps on the road. We just had a food show that was this week, so. You know, Tuesday we have an annual food show. It was in Burlington this year, and we had 500 different customers come out, and they get to see a wide variety of mix between, you know, sustainable, non-local products, local products, and we get to introduce them to things. And so it's exciting when a consumer goes, well, you know, You know, a chef goes, I want to put goat cheese on the menu, but, you know, I have this hotel and I need to portion it out and it's a pain in the ass. And then Vermont butter and cheese, and Allison pops up and goes, well, I do goat cheese medallions. They're perfectly portioned and this would be a great fit for your banquet menu. And they go, great, I'm going to put that on my menu. And then they put it on their menu, and that's a new consumer who was not buying that product. You know, Joe Boston finding enough producers to grow dried beans. Like, you're a chef and you're like, that's money in the bank. You know, $3.99 for blue potatoes or $2.39 for baked beans. You know, so there are opportunities that I think that are arising now as we get creativity, but it's also finding a use for those byproducts too. So we got a variety of food venture centers that are trying to make carrot sticks out of carrot ends and pieces and shredded carrots. And can we take, you know, on the beef side of it, can we take coal organic dairy cows, and instead of sending them to Pennsylvania, can we feed our schools and institutions those products? I think these are all great ideas, but what we have going on right now is a lot of conversation, a lot of innovation, a lot of trying to figure things out. And sometimes what we don't realize is that when you think about, you know, Vermont 5 years ago, 10 years ago, I mean, Black River couldn't even sell local lettuce. I mean, we would be like, hey, we got local lettuce, and people would just start sending it back and screaming at you on the phone. And now everybody's like, bring it to us. We want more local lettuce. And then the colleges are like, we want even more. So there's a great opportunity here, but there's also a great understanding that sometimes we got to take a step back and we have to say, you know, time is okay. Like, tomorrow we're not going to switch to a completely local diet. We're not going to grow hemp and make all of our clothes, and then you're going to slaughter your beef and we're going to make shoes in the slaughterhouse. It's not going to happen tomorrow. I mean, we could, because we have enough space. Vermont Purse Company. But the idea is that it's okay to we've definitely started, we're definitely ahead of the curve, and to keep it going and to keep looking at innovation and ways to improve on ourselves. And that's the part which offers us the greatest opportunity, is that Vermont producers don't sit back on their laurels and wait for something to come to them. Vermont producers find a way to stay in business, to stay viable, and to get it out there.
You're all growing, you're building and growing new things. You want to speak briefly about what's happening in North Springfield?
Yeah, so we bought the original Ben & Jerry's factory that did Peace Pops. It's about 43,000 square feet, so now we're going to do Meat Pops. But we spent the last 2.5 years longer talking about slaughter and processing in the state of Vermont and New England in general. And the first thing I can say is that our slaughterhouses and processors have an enormous amount of stress on them. They're very small, they're very old. It's a dying breed of professionals that have worked for years developing this business and have a firm belief in good animal handling and slaughter practices. It's not the business that you would say, oh, my 6-year-old who's a great violinist, oh, they're so great, they're gonna grow up and work in a slaughterhouse. That is not it, but it is something that we need, and something that we need to give better credit to and better appreciation of. And I think that far too often, even on the large-scale commercial side of it, we just don't actually respect what those people do. And just like the years ago when we didn't respect our small-scale farmers and producers, our cheesemakers, the people who milk cows every day, and that part is turned around, the further processing of whether it's livestock or value-added products or anything else is something where we really need to bring those people out into the limelight and appreciate what they do, because they feed our families every single day. We bought this facility because the infrastructure is going to change. You know, USDA regulation is intense, and the cost to get into meat processing. I mean, there's a reason why there are 8 big plants in the United States that do, 90-some% of the meat processing in America, is because it has to be really efficient. So Black River looked at what we can do to be really efficient, and part of it was that what a lot of producers wanted, including ourselves who do livestock, is we wanted to be able to do some kind of value-added production. So we do about 20 to 25 pigs a week with a couple producers, and we don't make any sausage off it. We actually sell it to Vermont Smoke and Cure, and they make, the Vermont Grown line, the Five Knives line with Greg Finch, and we sell some to Pete Coleman at Vermont Salumi, and he makes the sausage. So we love when we see those products out there, and we're like, they're legit, because we got a bill here that says it's legit. But we wanted to have accessibility to that, and we also wanted to have long-term investment for other producers. What happens if a slaughterhouse closes and you've got 40 beef in the fall that are booked, and now you don't have a place to kill and process them? Well, now at least, maybe we can find a processor who's down in Pennsylvania who can take them all at once, and then we can process them up here. Okay, so now there's options. Before, we didn't really have options. Now at least we have some kind of options. But long term, we really need to address animal handling all the way through the slaughter process. I mean, we do it really great on the livestock end. You can go to a farm and see how people raise them and put your hands in their feeds, and we spend a lot of time doing that. But when it comes to end of the life, a lot of people want to turn their head, and a lot of producers want animal welfare approved, certified humane. Whole Foods wants GAP auditing. All these things are big costs, and you can't absorb those costs necessarily if you're doing 10 beef a week. It's just not going to happen. It's too prohibitive. But if there was a regional slaughterhouse that was bigger, that could do value-added processing and sell to a variety of markets, then it would make sense. So we have built this thing, and it is a giant pain to do. When you open a USDA plant and you talk about real deal food safety, it is a awakening, to say the least. But we look at it as it will be a signal to producers that the infrastructure is in place to scale up, to have it done. It's the producer's job and it's a consumer's job to find new people who want to buy those products. But if we do better packaging and we do better portion control and cutting, then we can actually create our products with traceability for the outside markets too. The Vermont producer doesn't necessarily want to sell ground beef for $3 a pound, nor should they. The market will demand the price that they have. So if a Vermont producer wants to sell at a variety of price points to institutions or wholesale or direct to the consumer, they should have the freedom to do that. But a lot of producers say, my farm is this, I've got 50 head of cattle, I need to make this, where can I sell it? So our goal is to hopefully start exporting more beef and more dairy beef into different marketplaces, and the main marketplace that we are focused on is the conventional grocery store. The fact that you can go into a Hannaford's and Shaw's in this state and not find any local meat is sad. It's great for the farmer's market. That's where you go. That's where you buy that product. But for every person that shops at the farmer's market, there's 10 that don't. And wouldn't it be nice if they had an option that was there? So that's what we're doing.
Allison, do you want to talk about your goat farm for a minute?
Yeah, boy. So Bob and I have spent about 30 years building this brand and trying to figure out how to make cheese and get into the marketplace. And it's, you might think, well, gosh, that's an awfully long time. But 30 years ago, Americans didn't even eat goat cheese, and we had the audacity to think that they would. And so we kind of felt like, gosh, we're doing well. We've applied a tremendous amount of rigor to constant improvement, always trying to stay out in front, innovation, everything, to be able to always, be able to pay the farmers more money. And so we decided, look, we really want the farmers to do well. And so not that we know any better than the farmers, but we bought a farm in Randolph, Vermont, with the help of some investors, and are fitting up a demonstration farm. And our hope, it's got a lot of goals. Our hope is that VTC students will work there and get jazzed about milking goats. We're going to show them really good management, humane certification. We're going to breed very, very good breeding stock that we've sourced around the country. Brought these kids in, and now they're being bred to freshen next October. And our hope is that we'll have 10 new farms in Vermont in the next 10 years and begin to replace some of that milk that we buy outside of Vermont. But also, it's really important for us to bring our customers to the farm to see what happens there. They want to know what animals are fed. They want to know how they're treated. They want to experience that, and we need to be able to show them the value of what we do. when they come to the creamery and they see how much work and control goes into making this little 2-ounce cheese, they're kind of like, really? Is that all I'm paying? It completely changes the conversation, and we need to do the same thing with these goats. They're wonderful animals. They are so smart. They're so cool. And, you know, when consumers and customers and chefs and retailers come and they're going to fall in love with these animals, it really changes how they view our industry. So, you know, we're kind of really, I mean, Bob and I are just really out there. But, you know, we're just going to see what happens. Get right in there and get our hands dirty.
So I have so many more questions I'd like to ask everybody, but I want you to be able to ask as well. So I'd like the panelists to just answer really quickly one last thing, and that has to do with education of consumers. I'm kind of hearing a thread running through everything that we've talked about here tonight about understanding about the Vermont food systems, the infrastructure, and how important it is to support that or to be a part of that and to be able to afford that. I wonder if each of you could just say, if you could say to a consumer who maybe doesn't care about local one thing, what would it be? Christa, you want to start? Put you on the spot.
Can I give you time to think?
Did anybody else think faster? Sean, come on.
For someone who doesn't care about local?
Well, or isn't cognizant of it, let's say.
Well, you know, I question how much people really connect the working landscape with Vermont, you know, with what they see around them. You know, if you ask a Vermonter, what's a working landscape? Do they know that that's a pasture that an animal is grazing on, or that there is hay that has been harvested, you know, even timber that's been harvested? That I think is lost on a lot of people. And if it's lost on people here where we live it every day, imagine how lost it is on people who live in urban areas that really have no connection to that. And yet people come here and they love it, you know, to visit. And there's something very sort of magical about, you know, driving around and looking at these beautiful, you know, well-kept land, you know, that's gotten manure put on there, and you know, it's a great thing. But I think we can't emphasize that enough. We can't say it over and over enough, because I don't even think people know enough to even take it for granted, quite frankly. Mm-hmm. You know.
Christa, did you have time to think?
I can go.
All right, Michael, go.
I guess I would just ask them to just take a step back and think a little bit more about the whole process, kind of like what we discussed here tonight a little bit, as far as factoring in, you know, the costs of transporting the animals and slaughtering the animals, and then packaging the, you know, the animals or the vegetables, you know, whatever it may be, and you know, the work that goes into processing that, and in my case, cooking, you know, and preparing, and just taking the whole realm of the idea and the process of who's handling it and how it's being handled and how it's being taken care of. And then it kind of seems very affordable at the end, in my mind. Mm-hmm. And I think once, you know, people actually take that step back and see, then I think it's an easy choice.
I think all these people here are going to go to Bluebird and want to pay more.
Yeah.
Right?
I want the strip steak.
Christa?
Yeah. So what I was thinking about, like, the two things that my CSA customers say the most that sort of resonates in their lives once they have connected with a local farm is, one, the quality and the freshness of the product that they're getting. They're amazed if it's their first time buying locally or directly from a farm. And the other thing is the relationship they have with me, and or with our farm, and a connection to the community that they didn't have before. And so I think, you know, for people who need that or are looking for that, it's gonna resonate quickly the importance of local, and they're going to jump right in. And you know, that's not the whole population, but I think when people have finally made that connection, you know, that's one of the most powerful pieces of it, is the relationship and the trust. And so then once we've had those conversations about how things are grown, and they've seen how things are grown, and they've tasted the food, and it's been a part of their lives on a weekly basis or a daily basis, you know, then they don't need the constant reassurance. Then there's the trust, and they go on that.
Great, John.
I would say it's really three things. One is don't preach to people. Don't judge people for the choices that they make, and don't act like an elitist. I think too often we do all those things. I mean, it's local food. It's local food. It's great. It's the best thing. Why wouldn't you do this? The thing about people is they make those decisions and they make those changes in habits due to catalysts in their life or a change of opinion. And that's why we live a long time. So, you know, think about how you got to this point. I mean, there may be some people in this room who are like, I hate local food. But for the most part, everybody...
I don't think so.
They're just going to stand up and answer a question and be like, this sucks, I'm going to McDonald's. But all of us started at one point. I mean, when I was a kid, Hungry Man dinners, that was it. When I started cooking professionally, like the idea of perfectly wrapped IQF steaks pre-portioned was just genius, because there wasn't anything. Food's changed. Like, I mean, just think about the last decade of what you've seen. Think about the cheese counter at Healthy Living 10 years ago and now where it is today. Think about the options where you have to buy local food, and people change. And making sure that you don't turn off a future customer as somebody who's going to engage in local food is huge. Because if you know, I have 2 daughters. So if you tell my daughter when she's 16, like, don't date that guy with a Trans Am and a Magnum PI mustache, she's not going to date the guy from the chess club. Like, she's going to date the guy with the Magnum PI mustache. So, you know, just be careful. We can all have... I know she's going to date him.
This is being recorded.
He's such a jerk. But it really is just like, be honest about you and respect the choice that you make, but also respect the choice that other people make. Because that's America in a nutshell. We have the freedom to do whatever the hell we want, and we should be very grateful for that. But, you know, be respectful of others.
That is a great note to end on. Thank you so much, panelists. So, who would like to ask a question? Yes, back there.
Hi, I have a question about local restaurants claiming they have local food. I guess my question is, you know, it's obviously the trendy thing to do. There's some discrepancy around the term local. I know that some local restaurants have been taking the initiative to be audited in terms of how much local food they're actually using. My question is two-part. One, you know, what would be a percentage that, you know, is reasonable? I've heard over 50% locally sourced food is, you know, is sort of the standard for local food restaurants. And then is there a need for that to be regulated? You know, if you're going to call yourself a local farm-to-plate restaurant, you know, should you be audited every year? Is that something that, you know, we're going to look for in the future?
I mean, I can answer on this one. So we've been Vermont Fresh Network members for a long time. In fact, you know, most of us are involved with VFN at some point in time, whether we're members or we go to panels or we, you know, talk on the phone all the time. But, you know, this year Black River actually, we code everything as local. What we consider what we pick up in our distribution radius is a native product. So it's coded in our inventory management system. So for all of our Vermont Fresh Network partners that were restaurants, we ran that report and said your last years of purchases were this, and then we reported those back to Vermont Fresh Network and the restaurant to say, this is what it was. So when they put a ballpark figure, they were able to do that. We did it really because the schools and institutions that made these big, hey, we want to do 20% by 2020, they didn't have a way to do metrics. And since we had a lot of school accounts, we were able to run those metrics. I personally don't believe people should be audited, but as a consumer, you should call them out. You know, if it's a local spinach salad and the only thing that's on there is a Granny Smith apple from Washington State, you know it. I mean, you know the restaurants that buy local and the ones that don't, and when they try to pull it over on you, just don't shop there anymore. You know, don't shop at that grocery store anymore.
Yeah, I think it's a matter of trust, and if you ask the questions and you feel confident that they're answering the questions, and I think if there's consumers who go to those lengths, there are probably consumers who go to the farmers market and people who buy local and eat local at home. So you're probably going to be pretty educated as to what local spinach looks like versus the commodity spinach. So you'll have a good idea, even if the server says, yeah, that's local. I'm not sure what farm it came from, but I know we buy it local, you may have a good idea that maybe that's not local,
And also, too, I mean, by asking that question as a consumer, eventually that chef is going to say, well, it's a local burger because it's got local cheese on it. And eventually they're going to hear that question, where does this beef come from, enough, where they make a phone call and they say, we got to get local beef on this menu because we're going to lose a consumer. Everybody's asking for it and they're willing to pay for it. You can create that on demand, and you guys can create that change too.
Mm-hmm.
There was another question over here. Yeah.
Yeah, I noticed there seems to be a bit of a disconnect between how most of you are answering questions and how we started off this evening, which was hearing about how there are 86,000 people in Vermont who don't know where their next meal is coming. Can any of you address how to get more low-income people into the local food system, or are they just sort of stuck as second-class citizens in food, getting less nutritious food, less delicious food, and thus will be further propagating the issue that the low-income families don't eat enough vegetables?
That was going to be one of my questions later, so thanks for bringing it up. That's a good one. Who wants to go?
There's two things that we do direct at the farm. Well, one is Vermont Food Bank comes to our farm every week and picks up our excess produce. So we do always overproduce in order to make sure we are meeting our markets. And like last year was an incredible growing season, so we had even more than we had planned on overproducing, and we moved a lot of that to the Vermont Food Bank. And it's great. Their system is very efficient, and because we don't have the time to get the stuff to the food bank, they come to the farm on one of their routes every week, and we know when they're coming, and we set it out, and we don't even have to be there, and the driver picks it up, and it works very smooth. The other thing we do is with NOFA Vermont, we participate in their Vermont Farm Share program, and that helps to cost share on CSA shares for folks, and there's farms that participate throughout the state, and NOFA matches 25% through some of their funding sources. And then our farm does donations and fundraisers with our CSA members, and we match 25% of the cost, and then the CSA member pays 50%. And so people can apply for this program, and we support, every year it's been growing, so I think we're gonna probably, be up somewhere close to 20 families that we'll support this year throughout, the year. We do year round, so throughout the year.
I know for myself too, if I can comment on that one. I do it all the time just because I think being a chef and handling a lot of food, that, a lot of the grocery stores, you'll see there's like a bruised section that's discounted. And for me, that's like the gold mine, because I know that I look where the bruise is and it's in a spot where I know I can trim it away and get that good, or maybe, the herb is a little darker, but I'm going to cook it anyway, so it doesn't really matter. So, at least they're trying to make it a little bit more accessible at a lower price. And like I said, myself, I have a good time in that area. So
I have a feeling John wants to address this.
Well, I would like to, in addition to, I said everyone here, except the restaurant, and most restaurants, high-end restaurants aren't donors to the Vermont Food Bank. But I think the question also goes to people who don't need to go to a food shelf but feel priced out of this market. And Enid's here from NOFA Vermont, and they have their low-cost CSA, and there are other programs like that around the state, and we actually are reaching out to those organizations and working with them and trying to build a more systematic, more momentum around getting this fresh produce to lower income people. And at the food bank, we're thinking about this too, and there's a lot of work going around the country to get more fresh produce to low income folks. And so keep your eyes and ears open for maybe some interesting things happening in the next year. And really, the farmers in Vermont are committed to getting their food to everybody. And it's just really hard. It's the cost of local food. So everyone is working with us, and like I said at the beginning, this system won't work unless it works for everybody. And we're not there yet, but again, I think someone was talking about it takes time to get there, and just rest assured that we're working on that as one of the issues.
There are also some groundbreaking school food programs that are addressing, that's kind of a whole other discussion really, but it's another avenue for getting food to kids, at least, if not whole families.
I would also add that, in our business, we try to help consumers learn how to cook, It doesn't have to be fancy. Cheese is a great protein, it's... and when you look at some of the marketing towards low-income population with very expensive prepared nasty stuff, people learned how to cook just very simple foods with good ingredients. That can really go a long way.
I mean, I think it's a really great question, because I think we've been talking about affordability and accessibility at the state level through a variety of different groups. And often, we bring local into that conversation, and really I don't think local is ready for that conversation. I think there are a variety of programs at work, and local is involved with it, but the idea that we only make affordable food over-processed, commodity-driven ingredients that are just not healthy for you, that is the main problem. How do you get somebody to buy a pound of local spinach when they can buy 2 loaves of commodity white bread? It's just very hard. And when you're on a limited budget, how do you go through that? I think it talks to the education piece, and it also does talk about the school system piece. With schools, we know their budgets, we pay our taxes. How many of you have read through your school board budget and looked at what they're spending on food and said, well, I want to know how much you buy fresh. I don't want Elio's frozen pizza in my kid's school. We don't do that, So we talk about it a lot, but I live in a community that's really nice. We have a great school system, and the food there is garbage. And I don't feed my kids it because I make their lunch every day. But why can't we have fresh food that starts in schools, so that they can go home, that they can learn to cook, that we can bring home ec back and train people how to do it, that we can have adult programs that are subsidized and for free so that they can learn how to cook. The food bank, when we go there and we see the chefs there, they're taking farm product and they're making scratch meals. It would be much easier for them to buy those Hungry Man dinners and say, this is food, this is what we can afford on our budget, and this is it. But it doesn't always happen, and it takes a long time. But I would really say that, what we need to do is just kind of step back from local into everything, is to unprocessed raw ingredients and getting people to use them is really a better place to start.
And I have to interrupt because I've been looking over this way the whole time, and I called out Enid, but Tara Kelly is here from the Rutland Area Farm and Food Bank Raffle, who in that part of the state does tremendous work they have a grow-a-row program in gleaning, and they distribute produce to low-income people all over the region in Rutland, Addison County. So there are groups all over the state doing this great work.
You had a question.
Yeah, from No Fun. I just wanted to say that I think what a lot of people don't realize is that $12 million every month are spent in food stamps in Vermont. And a lot of those food stamp recipients haven't had access to a lot of local foods. So we've been working with a huge state group on having electronic benefits transfer, these credit cards where food stamps are, to be able to be used at farmers markets, for instance. So now half of the farmers markets in the state can accept EBT, and so I think it's just really interesting, Sean, your strategy to get food into where people are shopping already and can use those EBT cards to purchase local foods. And I think that's been a huge part of the problem from our perspective is you have a lot of money. I mean, that's a huge market opportunity for farmers in Vermont. And Bernie Sanders used to say, you know, the government's doing our shopping for us and farmers aren't able to get that, you know, it's a huge marketing opportunity for farmers in Vermont to capture those dollars, and they haven't really had the opportunity to capture those dollars because low-income individuals haven't been able to use their card.
Right.
So I think that's a huge
That's a big
access
step.
issue. Yeah.
And I also think that, I mean, if you're not low income and you're not on the EBT level, but you know, you're a young college student and you're like, oh, I want access, you know, call a farmer who's got a CSA and say, what can I do to get a free CSA? I mean, I pick your own. I do blueberries and berries and apples and all that stuff because it's a little cheaper, and you know, it's. But if you called somebody and said, hey, I can't afford this, what can I do for you to make sure I get this? You could work to pay that off too.
Yes.
I have two questions. One is I wonder what percentage of Vermont public schools have some local food aspect, and aren't those kids going to bring it back home to their parents of all different income levels? So I'm just curious what percentage. And my second question is what parts of Vermont agriculture do you think are least used or most undervalued or going to waste? And what can you imagine creating out of that, whatever that is?
Does anybody know the answer to that first one?
A third.
Schools? A third.
So a third of Vermont public schools, those kids are going to go home sooner or later and start raising their parents' consciousness.
And they're driving a lot of demand right now. They're driving a lot of parent demand.
Or they'll grow a garden at their house, you know, or their dad will take them hunting.
We had a group of kids from the Callis school system yesterday, and there was a boy who, a young third grader, who asked a question. Now, he said, "Now, is the mold on your cheese the same mold that is on the salumi?" I was like, "We're like, well, yeah." It's like, wow, pretty good.
Education. Rachel.
So what's the underused thing and how can we harness it?
Oh, sorry.
Land is the underused thing. You know, that we have an enormous amount of land that we don't necessarily keep it working into agriculture.
The Vermont Farm to Plate Network, which is legislatively directed to double the state's local food access, production, and economic impact by 2020. I'd like to hear any of your comments or advice for that network and network.
Well, I know there's a lot of focus on infrastructure for distribution and processing, and I think that is certainly one of the directions of areas that needs to be developed. And we've talked a lot about that already, especially on the meat processing end of things, but even in vegetable processing. Like, you know, we grow, 30,000 pounds of carrots every year, and it's like, of that, some portion of them are seconds or culls, and we can sell them as seconds to like juice bars in the schools and things, processors who are gonna use them in the kitchen, so to speak. But, you know, wouldn't it be great to like make the carrot stick or whatever for, you know, if that's a more accessible product for a certain market. But I don't want to do that. I want to grow the carrots. I don't want to figure out how to process them. And so I want to be able to have someone else who's making the business out of that end of it and be able to sell them the product and they take it the rest of the way. So I think some of those things are that have been talked about a lot, and a lot of work's starting in those areas. Those are key.
Maybe just a couple more. Yeah.
To what extent is the state involved in partnering on some of these products that you've been talking about? Does the state get involved?
They're cheering for us.
Do you want them to?
Did everyone hear that question? To what
How much
extent
does
does the state get involved in some of these partnerships? Anyone have an answer?
Well, that's the engagement with the farms to plate network.
Yes.
Yeah,
I mean,
more and more all the time.
I mean, if the state subsidized some of the things you're talking about to help you get to that.
Yeah, I mean, the state, federal government, there's a lot of grants out there. There's grants, I mean, more people apply for grants. There's definitely a lot. When you do write that grant, your hands are tied to a series of things, you know, and a lot of producers and a lot of distributors or wholesalers or whatever, a lot of businesses just decide to do it on their own, you know, and so it's really a choice. But there is access to capital that's out there, and then there's a series of nonprofits that are really national that, you know, will take corporate money where it's earmarked for this specific thing, and then they'll try to put it in. It is there, but I mean, the amount of capital that it takes is just enormous. You know, just on the meat processing side. You know, I can buy a grinder for $2,000, you know, that's basic, or I can buy an inline VMAG portioner that's $60,000, and then a patty attachment is another $60,000, and then a packaging machine to do it so it looks like a normal grocery store package is $160,000. I mean, these are big numbers. You have to have a certain volume of something that can make that happen.
There is funding, like for the farm to school program that the Agency of Agriculture manages, so that helps in terms of getting some of those programs going. And then there's a really awesome program, the Vermont Farm Viability Program, that is funded under VHCB, the Vermont Housing Conservation Board, that I encourage you all to support, because it has done wonders, I think, for a lot of the farms throughout the state who are getting started, trying to get technical assistance, trying to get some startup capital and do some business planning, because that's one thing is when you start farming, if you haven't come from a business background, you have to figure all that out. And it's the key to keeping yourself in business and profitable and figuring out the right way to access markets and what you're trying to do. And that program is outstanding and has helped a lot of farmers. So it's funded every year through state, you know, our state budget. And I believe there's some matching federal funds available too. But it's one of those things that we should never be voted out of the budget.
I would just add to the farm to plate question. It's good that the state has kind of taken inventory of what people are doing and how it all kind of fits together. And, you know, to have a vision of, you know, for 2020 is a good thing. You know, in business, we sort of create a vision about what we want the thing to look like in 10 years or 5 years. 10 is pretty far out, but it's the best way to get there. And, you know, good for Farm to Plate for having sort of made this sort of very seemingly bold statement. But, you know, you won't get there if you don't forecast and plan for it. So it's good.
Doreen.
So a number of you spoke to the question of telling the story as a way to increase that market and bring people in your case, experience the story. I wonder if part of it is also the other side of the coin, which is what is the real cost of non-local food? Because I don't think we've ever really put that equation together. It's just the conventional versus them. We don't talk about what all the hidden transportation and other costs are in there. And I think that's part of the story, those subsidies that are so
like one of my best high school friends said to me, well, I love your beef, but it's so expensive. And I said, well, you've already paid for the other beef in your taxes. You just don't realize it.
Right.
So, you know, I'm not subsidized through any programs. You know, there's grants I can compete for, but there's not regular subsidy programs for small-scale agriculture and grass-based production. That's part of the reality that a lot of people don't recognize in sort of the industrial food system, so to speak. And I wanted to mention, too, in terms of, like, what is the state doing outside of state government? This state is amazing. I mean, state government's doing a great job, too, but outside of that, there is an amazing network of associations, professionals, and organizations that support agricultural and local food access. I mean, NOFA is one of them, Vermont Food Bank, of course. Even just as a producer, the network of producers is amazing, the support among farmers with each other. It's a very open dialogue. It's not combative or, I mean, I'm sure there's, you know, competition, and that's good, but it's all very it's just amazing. I mean, to grow here and have all these people who are trying to figure it out together and help each other and share technical information, share resources. We have a professional organization of vegetable and berry growers. That's probably one of the best in the region. We have an extension program through UVM that's got some really excellent professionals assisting the producers and the processors. And I think we're really fortunate, and a lot of people don't recognize that all these pieces are operating behind the restaurants, the producers, the farmers market, the local co-op who are supplying these products.
I would say we take for granted that in Vermont, you know, the Vermont Fresh Network has really pioneered the farm-to-table movement. And, you know, we talk about Alice Waters, and but I'd say here in this state, here we have not a long growing season. It's hard to produce some of this stuff, and yet we've really carved out this incredible niche in both chefs and consumers' mind to really create this stamp, that chefs can rally around. It's been maybe 15 or 20 years now. It's a big deal.
It's pretty exciting. Anything else? All right. Well, thank you everybody for coming. Give yourself some applause. I hope you'll enjoy the rest of Vermont Restaurant Week. And it looks like one of our sponsors, Vermont Spirits, is still in business back there. Hello. So please imbibe responsibly. Thank you.